Dereleen James now joins me online. She's a member of parliament for Action South Africa. She has shown her support to mothers that have expressed their frustrations over the rising levels of crime in Cape Flats communities. This week, mothers from Overcome Heights chained themselves to the gates of parliament demanding action. They're even calling for the South African National Defence Force to be deployed to their areas, saying that the police are overstretched and cannot make or dent any of the high levels of crime afflicting Cape Flats communities at this time. Dereleen James, certainly before joining Parliament, she was quite active in her community of Eldorado Park in Johannesburg, and she now joins me on the line. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me.
Given the spate of violence that we see on the Cape Flats at the moment, much like sometimes is the case in Eldorado Park, how would you describe this problem? Of course, it's easy to say it's a gangsterism problem, but it isn't quite just as simple as that.
No, there are many underlying and there are many enablers to what we see unfolding on the Cape Flats. I think this is as a result of years of neglect. This is as a result of the Group Areas Act, who has literally just dumped those people there and basically forgotten about them, it would appear. This is as a result of the high unemployment rate, the poverty in the area, the high school dropout rates. There's many contributing factors to where the Cape Flats finds themselves today. It is not just a matter of policing. It is not just a matter that everyone just woke up and decided that, you know what, they're going to be drug addicts and they're going to form part of gangs. It was almost as if though the pressures of life and the fact that they are feeling stuck, there's no movement in those areas, there's no upliftment, there's no connectedness to resources in those areas. And this is why we find ourselves having to deal with this high spate of gangsterism, daily killings. Also yesterday, what I came across was the alarming high rate of children on the Western Cape, specifically from the Cape Flats, that's in places of safety as a result of their parents. And I visited her home yesterday and I asked her, what is one of the things that contributes to all of these kids being in a places of safety and in foster care? And she said to me, it is substance abuse and grave neglect from parents.
How desperate do you think these mothers are, and at least how they see the problem? These mothers that chained themselves, against the gates of Parliament. The fact that I suppose that they chained themselves there shows the level of desperation they now hold, calling for intervention. But oftentimes, in trying to understand this problem, which, as you say, is certainly, have several contributing factors to it, that there's an issue around, unemployment, first of all. Then there's an issue around drug dependency in these communities, and oftentimes the shielding of those that are involved in the gang violence, the gun runners, where the weapons are coming from, etc. That there is active intelligence within communities, but they don't seem to be put to use, in a way that, certainly would lead to arrests and convictions. So how do they see the all of society problem that we're confronted with, and whether perhaps they also require some sort of an introspection on the part of communities in what it is that they can do to try and root out the problem?
No, definitely. I think with every situation unfolding in our communities, especially when it comes to drugs, especially when it comes to gangs. Kyk, ons weet wat gaan aan in onze gemeenskappe in. We know that there are those families. I've had first-hand experience in my community where I hail from, where, we've had stakeouts at spaces in the mornings where the kids buy their drugs from. And there were mothers who actually came out there and said, as julle hier staan, wie gaan vir my 'n pak hoender koop vanmiddag? That is what we heard. So we know that many of our parents, in fact, because of the socio-economic conditions, they are on the side of dealers when it comes to putting a loaf of bread on the table. But we are also saying when we are taking away and when we are eradicating drugs, we've got to push something else into our communities. A lot of these places, homes, we know family homes that are actually storing the drugs for the drug dealers. We know that there are a lot of family members who's aware of the fact that their children are involved in gangs, sort of hiding and covering up the firearms. And when the police go out there to effect arrests, the vehicles get stoned. We've seen that happening. We've seen how communities raise up against SAPs when they come in. But like I'm saying, the approach that needs to be taken cannot solely be dependent on SAPs. You need social development, you need upliftment, you need economic development to come in there as well. We also need to reflect on our borders and have a look at what is happening at our borders. How are these drugs gaining access into our communities? So yes, number one, when it comes to communities taking responsibility, rightfully so. I always say that, if we can do this street by street, we need to realize that there are more good in our communities than what there is bad. Meaning, if you have 10 houses in the street, there's probably only one house that is a drug den of a penapos. If the 9 houses and 9 families can stand up against one family, and say, not on our watch, not in our street, surely that's going to mean something, to know that this is a drug-free zone. So we need to take our communities back street by street. But in order for us to do this, because it's escalated to the extent where it is now, we can no longer do it alone, because we see the recklessness in these sort of children just pulling out firearms and just gunning down people.
Yeah. We are talking to Dereleen James. She is a member of parliament for ActionSA. If the name sounds familiar, it's because, sometimes, she is, seen, of course, quite at the forefront of a whole host of issues, issues like these, trying to understand and or respond to concerns of communities, one of which recently, Dereleen, was Bonteheuwel. And, this brings me to the next part of this discussion, that on the one end, while yes, there is a challenge, as you say, that, when asking mothers and community members to speak up, that, it's not quite as simple as that, because they are reliant on the illicit criminal economy, that, those that sell the drugs, often would remunerate them either for their silence or for their participation in, creating a safe haven, either for the sale of drugs or the storage of illegal weapons. That while that in part, characterizes a part of the problem, the other bit that's got to do with the police bringing safety. And as you said a bit earlier, it's not just a policing problem, but the police does play a very crucial role in this. I grew up in Bonteheuwel. I know Bonteheuwel. It's the only area I've known for very many years until I moved out of the area. And you were correct in your assessment there that there hasn't even been a proper police station. And gang violence, of course, in an area like Bonteheuwel, it's not new. It's not a 5-year-old problem. It's been there for the longest time, yet we don't quite see the capacitation of police services to be able to offset the level of violence that we see at the moment. And therein lies a very crucial problem, about the way in which the state responds to this issue.
Absolutely. And what was even more shocking was a couple of months ago when I came across an article where the Western Cape Provincial Commissioner General Patekile said, things are under control on the Western Cape. I couldn't believe that a leader actually uttered those words, saying things are under control. This entire week I have been watching the groups and people have been sending me updates. I don't have the exact number and the stats as to the killings just for this week, but I can tell you almost every day there's been between Monday and yesterday afternoon, when I did the last check, there's been between 3 and 5 people gunned down. This is just from Monday. I think around about the 12th of this month, I was trying to keep track of the killings. Obviously, this is just what comes through on the groups. And we were already over, I think it was over 50. Over 50 plus this week, let's say another 20. Imagine having close to 100 deaths every month, and you have a Western Cape commissioner that says things are under control. Things are never under control when you have 44,000 children in places of safety, being sexually abused and violated by their own parents, being sold so that their parents can get their next fix. And he says things are under control. you're so right when you say that, Bontejevel has been there for many years. It has recorded alarming rates of violence and of crime in that area. I was so shocked. I think I did an oversight there after the brutal killing of the 2-month-old baby in that community. And I was so shocked when I got there and I found that, you know what, the one vehicle that was standing in the yard had no business being in the yard. I think that's for starters. I think, secondly, I was shocked to find that there's not enough resources. And this is not even just at Bonteheuwel. They have a satellite station that's been there for years on end. And I was still going to do a parliamentary question just to follow up. How much are we paying for rental for that building? Because basically, those are just four walls. There's no active and real policing, because when a complaint comes through, they have to activate other police stations and other vehicles to come in and be the first responders. So that for me was really shocking and alarming. I also know the reason why we have been calling on SANDF to come in. What are our soldiers doing at the moment? They're doing absolutely nothing. So why can they not take to the streets and just stabilize the areas, even if it's just for 21 days, while all other sort of departments and stakeholders come in? So that is what I found at that police station. And what I actually want to say is the fact that our police service, even if they are able to address what is unfolding, they are under-resourced, they are understaffed, they don't have they don't hold at present the necessary intelligence actually for an intervention that would yield actual tangible results in our areas. Even if we deploy 1,000 boots, just imagine going into an area that you're unfamiliar with. Deploying 1,000 boots on the ground and saying we are pumping up on the manpower in these areas. Daai members weet nie eens waar om te begin nie. They literally drive around in their vehicles the entire day. You see them parking under trees, and that is it. They don't have the intelligence. They haven't been briefed properly. These are the places. This is the mapping for this area. This is the places we need to hit. These are the culprits. These are the perpetrators. They just go in there blindly and sort of parole. And before you know it, they too sometimes are in the pockets of these dealers and these heads of gangs, and that's the end of it until the next deployment, until the next imbizo.
Yeah, we're talking to Dereleen James. It's 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Dereleen, there's been, of course, look, I mean, you do represent a political party, so we are sensitive to the views you may hold. Of course, before then, you were a community activist, as you still continue to be. However, there's been a lot of, reaction this week about President Ramaphosa telling ANC councillors that, in DA-run municipalities, there's something to learn there because, audits are clean and things appear to be in better shape comparative to where ANC municipalities run. And while I'm not asking you necessarily a political question on the assessment of DA or ANC municipalities, one of the key responses from listeners of Radio 786 this week to that ongoing debate is the fact that, beneath the surface of clean audits lie some very big questions to be asked about, how developed, Cape Flats communities have become, whether or not there is sustained investment with a view that, job creation is center point, the area looks better, the area has tarred roads, this, that, and the other. Of course, it's subjective from area to area, but as a whole, what is your assessment about whether government appears at least to be showing some sort of an interest, be it local government, be it national government, some sort of an interest to develop these areas with a view to provide opportunity so that more and more young people don't get involved in these crimes?
I think the answer to that question is what we see unfolding on the Cape Flats, specifically in many of these areas. We have to be confronted by the reality that we are seeing. If we do not have 100 deaths in 1 week, that should tell us that, you know what, if we do not have a situation escalating 3 decades later, we would know that there's definitely development. We would know that there's more people coming in there. Economic opportunities are on the rise. We have more investors in that area. But as time continues, we see those areas being robbed from possible economic opportunities. No one wants to invest in those areas. This tells me when we say that the DA municipalities are the best run in the country, there's something my gran wants to say, and I unfortunately cannot say it on radio. It's wat gaan soos bo blink. You're going to make up that sentence yourself, the rest of it. I think where we see services in the Cape is basically in the CBDs, the areas that basically caters for your tourists. Those are the areas that are well kept and well governed, definitely so, like no other municipality. But the minute you step into a Mitchellsplein, the minute you step into a Bonteheuwel, dan lyk dit amper vir my asof ek in Eldorado Park is. That's when you are confronted with the potholes. That's when you are confronted with heaps of dirt. That is when you are confronted and you see that, you know what, other than policing, these areas aren't even being serviced in terms of ordinary service delivery. There's nothing happening in this area. Of course, people are going to feel stuck because there's blatant neglect from these areas. The fight continues between the DA calling for, saying that they want the powers for policing, ANC probably saying, let's leave things as they are so that the DA can look bad and people won't, it's almost as if though families has become a political pawn in the South Africa that we're living in. South Africa is a beautiful country. South Africa is a country worth fighting for. The Cape Flats is part of this beautiful country that is worth fighting for. And I think it is time that we pull in all resources and we keep this matter in the media. We all have a role to play, rightfully so, like you guys are doing this morning. Thank you so much, because without media support, we cannot go much further because they don't hear us and they don't see us.
It is NRA and Radio 786. Dereleen James is my guest, a member of Parliament for ActionSA. As it stands right now, the open letter to President Ramaphosa about the high crime levels nationally and in the Western Cape, of course, had been penned. And in it, of course, it raises, again, all of the issues that we're referring to right now. Look, and there's been different approaches. On the one end, you have the city of Cape Town now that's charging, certain households a levy essentially to be able to fund additional deployment of law enforcement to their communities within a dedicated ward. That every ward, the idea is that every ward will have a dedicated amount of law enforcement officers to bring safety to their area. There's was a Western Cape crime safety plan of the Western Cape government, which remains questionable about whether it is impactful, together with a sort of national approach, which was to impose or to establish the anti-gang unit, and that unit, we are hearing, is just not being resourced in the way that perhaps we now hear the political killings task team was. And I know that's a national sensitive question at the moment based on what's happening at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. From a social development perspective, I'm not quite certain what the plans are there, if there are any plans to respond to this crisis. But I want to begin to wrap up now, Dereleen, by looking at what is this country's plan. Let's forget ANC government, DA government, this, that, and the other, local, national government. Is there a plan, a blueprint somewhere, somehow, that more than just from a policing SANDF approach, that has an understanding of the problem that we're dealing with, and the extent to which, if we do not urgently do something about it, increasingly more and more young people will find a home within these gang formations, that the problem will only just get a lot more worse. And that, to me, to be honest, sounds like, we're heading in a doomsday direction for communities like the Cape Flats and elsewhere.
Yeah, I want to say that there has been a plan for many years, what we have, the country's plan to address substance abuse, gangsterism, GBV, child neglect. We have a document called the National Drug Master Plan. Every 5 years, this document gets revised, and we have a new plan based on sort of the implementation, based on what has worked, what hasn't worked, what needs to be strengthened. The National Drug Master Plan is a document that has been drafted from the Substance Abuse Act, in line with the Substance Abuse Act. And the National Drug Master Plan, basically, there's a body called the Central Drug Authority that is responsible for the implementation of the National Drug Master Plan in all 9 provinces. Unfortunately, there too, what we see, the people that's responsible, I think they're a body of about 11 members, composes of 11 members, and that body comprises of people from civil society, from the department, and also you have representation on there from 21 government departments. That includes DCS, that includes sports and recreation, that is education, that is DSD, that is SAPS, that is NPA. All of those departments form part as representation on the committee as the Central Drug Authority. And they are meant to report into the CDA with their plans in terms of what they have done in all 9 provinces when it comes to sports. We know a child in sport is a child out of court. And we find today that of the 21 departments that reports into the CDA responsible for the implementation of the National Drug Master Plan, there are only 10 departments that are reporting. You ask departments such as DCS, where's your plan? Because we've heard from the president that because we have inmates that has access to laptops, sometimes what we see unfolding in our communities is as a result of the orchestrated crime that is unfolding in our cells. And you ask DCS, do you have a plan? And they say no. Yet we have a legislated document that goes via Parliament that mandates every municipality to have a local drug action committee where these challenges can be filtered through from local level to provincial level. On provincial level, we have a provincial substance abuse forum that then reports into the CDA. But I must ask you, how many active local drug action committees do we have within the Cape Flats? I think that's going to be a shocking reality that's going to stay us. And then we will better understand why the information and why the challenges in all these departments aren't filtering through to the CDA. And that will probably tell us why there's no reporting to the CDA. The CDA is also gravely under-resourced in terms of funding. For a committee responsible to address drugs in the country, imagine having a budget of only 8 million rand. 8 million rand. And of the 8 million rand, you find DSD responsible, the Secretariat and some of the members actually tapping into that budget and utilizing it for trips, this without the knowledge of the chairperson of the CDA. So there goes more of the monies that is meant to address substance abuse across the country in various communities.
Which is why communities get so angry about this. Thank you very much, Dereleen James, for speaking to us. And I think, to the point, to the end there, the issue here is that, corruption has a very direct impact on service delivery and, stealing from the public. Particularly at a time when these resources can be put to much better use, and we can capacitate the fight against the scourge of gangsterism and drugs, and by extension deal with the social crisis that we have in our hands. Young people that are increasingly disillusioned with not being able to find a job, not even going to school. There's so many kids not in school at the moment, it's a massive problem that if we do not necessarily find an urgent approach to deal with it, we stand the risk of losing a big part of this generation, and that to me is a terrible tragedy to stare down. Thank you very much, Dereleen James, for coming onto the program this morning, a Member of Parliament for ActionSA.